The ERP Doctors with Dan Aldridge and Sam Gupta, powered by Inside Jam.
Hey everybody, my name is Dan Aldridge. I'm the Director of North America for Partners to Innovate, and I'm here with my partner, Sam Gupta at Elevate IQ. So I'll turn it over to you, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Always a pleasure on the show. I think this is the second one, right, Dan? It's always fascinating, the kind of insights that we are gathering on this particular show. So yeah, just a quick about me, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, Dan, do you want to start with the stories for this week?
Yes. So actually, why don't you go ahead and pick that up, because I don't have my list right here. So
okay, so let's start with so I don't know whether you want to start with the Flexis story. So there are four. Number one acquisition is between your Blue Yonder as well as Flexis. So that is the acquisition. So I don't know if you have had a chance to look at that. I can quickly read it. I can provide my commentary in terms of where this acquisition is, and then obviously I would love to hear your insights, Jen, on these stories as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on Blue Yonder. So Blue Yonder, I don't think we have covered so far on this particular show. So Blue Yonder, the way they are positioned in the market, that is supply chain suite. Okay. And the way supply chain suites work, they are going to have very similar constructions as your ERP suite. As part of ERP suite, for example, let's say if you look at vendors such as your Infor, Epicor, nowadays, these vendors are combining a lot of different capabilities. That is not going to be just pure play ERP. It's going to be probably, let's say if we take the example of Infor, that's going to be your ERP plus PLM plus WMS plus TMS. Sometimes that could be bundled as part of ERP, and sometimes that could be bundled as part of supply chain suite. So the way supply chain suites are constructed, again, going back to your Blue Yonder, so here the suite is going to be your WMS, it's going to be your TMS, it's going to be your OMS plus an SNOP platform. So these 4 or 5 different capabilities, typically, they are not going to overlap with any of the ERP capabilities, which is going to be your costing, etc. That is slightly more on the finance side. So this particular construction is going to be more from the sales perspective, a little bit of operations. So the layer is very different. Typically, this architecture is going to be relevant in the retail space. Now, these supply chain suites over the period of time have grown a lot. They have acquired a lot of different capabilities. If you look at suites such as your E2Open, Blue Yonder, all of them, they are very heavy right now, okay? And they overlap with the ERP capabilities too. Now, one of the most complex capabilities that we have in this is going to be your configure to order, okay? And configure to order, typically, if you look at more from the ERP lenses, that is probably one of the most mature process in general, if you want to implement that. But now, these configurable products are also part of your supply chain suite in the retail world. So it's slightly different than your manufacturing. So the focus of Flexis is going to be more on the retail world, and they have acquired this capability. So they are trying to, mature their platform. So not only you are going to have the entire supply chain collaboration, all of that was part of Blue Yonder. So now with Flexis, you are going to get a lot more capabilities from the configure to order perspective. So that's my understanding of the acquisition. Super exciting, because I have not seen any other vendors do this. So most likely what we are going to see in the market is maybe E2Open is going to follow up with the similar acquisition, because they are competitors. So we are going to see a lot more vendors moving towards these capabilities. So I'll stop there, Dan. I don't know what comments you are going to have.
Yeah, so I'm most familiar with supply chain management in the manufacturing world. So it's been typically a separate supply chain management type suite that works with an integrated ERP platform. But this seems to be, so you're saying it's headed more in the retail direction, which is also very interesting. I think that Blue Yonder is making a play there, and you have actually. I don't know if they have the e-commerce capability, but that's very important also in retail, right? And there's configurations that happen in an e-commerce scenario, right? So it's B2C, that kind of thing in retail. also omni, or it's called omni-channel.
Omni-channel.
If they're getting into omni-channel, right? But it seems like they are. So they're at least broaching that topic in a retail or a distribution, more of a distribution WMS type scenario than manufacturing. Do you think that's what they're trying to do?
Yeah, so I'll provide some more, commentary there if that is helpful. So number one, the comment that you made related to e-commerce. So obviously, when you look at the front end of the e-commerce, right, when you have these e-commerce platforms, obviously that is going to be one channel that retail businesses have to deal with. But that is probably, 10%, 15% revenue, 20% revenue for the major retailers. The 80%, 90% of the revenue comes from the traditional channels, which is going to be either your distributor or that is going to be your, stores, right? So that's where your store planning, merchandising, analytics, all of those capabilities are going to be prevalent. So Blue Yonder, for the most part, they are mainly present in the retail verticals, but there are going to be manufacturing verticals where you have retail, and you mentioned the term B2C, play. So for B2C play, any of the B2C transactions generally reside in supply chain suite because ERP transactions are going to be very thick. For the most part, ERP transactions are really designed for B2B centric processes. The way your credit approval is going to be is very different in general. So in general, even if the most B2C friendly ERP, which is probably NetSuite right now, even that is very thick from the capabilities perspective. That's why your B2C transactions and B2B transactions, there is a clear boundary and clear resignation. But in some cases, you have to mix those transactions. You have to host those transactions in the same layer. For example, let's say if you look at the aftermarket verticals, right? In that you are going to have retail component, you are going to have distribution component, plus service, plus manufacturing. So that's where things get very complex in general. So when you are going to have all of those business models, then you require a supply chain suite that can manage all of this workflow, plus your trade finance, plus your supply, supplier collaboration. So there's a lot that goes in as part of your supply chain suite. So e-commerce would be just one channel, I would say. This is going to be the back end side, but not the ERP backend.
Right.
It's sort of somewhere in between. So I don't know if that helps, Dan.
It does, because what I was thinking of is when you were talking about configuration. So you add Flexis to the picture, right? When you're talking about configuration, it kind of is moving into the area of CPQ, right? Configure price quote. Do you think?
So that's going to be So very interesting, workflow. So now you are going to have the B2C architecture, you are going to have B2B architecture. So generally, when you look at this more from the ERP lenses, the assumption is going to be that CPQ is going to be more from the B2B lenses. But here, now you are also talking about customizable products when you look at B2C workflow. So now there is a clear segmentation here. So this one is going to be more for the B2C play, but sometimes the B2B transactions might reside inside this layer as well. And if they do, then you are going to have very different workflow. So this is very, 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 very complex in general, these capabilities, Dan.
Yeah, and I brought up the e-commerce because I'm thinking of a scenario in retail where you have something like a Shopify or a WooCommerce or something like that front end. They'll have a lot of that maybe configuration logic or parts and SKUs and things like that sitting up there. So there is some possibility to do configuration. When you get into complex configuration logic, you're really looking at a CPQ tool that's going to push through to a manufacturing system.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So for the most part, when you look at any of these e-commerce platforms, such as your WooCommerce or Shopify, they are generally baby e-commerce, to be completely honest, okay? Even though you are going to have a large, companies utilizing Shopify, but the capabilities that you have inside those, they are not as mature as to handle scenarios such as your configuration or configurable processes or CPU-centric processes. Okay, so for that, you have a lot of enterprise-centric e-commerce platforms. They are going to have your CPQ capabilities. For example, let's say if you look at SAP. Okay, so SAP S/4HANA, does not have CPQ built as part of the ERP. Info takes a very different approach, okay? Every vendor takes a very different approach. So typically, if you look at their CPQ, it resides inside your Hybris layer. Because technically, when you are going to have your B2C and B2B as part of your, as part of your commerce model, then it has to reside there. So that's why they don't necessarily have the CPQ built as part of ERP. So it's a different architecture. You go to Salesforce. Salesforce is going to take very different approach. They also have their CPQ built as part of their CRM platform, commerce platform. So ERP is completely decoupled in that too. So everybody takes very different approach to how the configurator processes are going to be, I guess, then.
Yeah, I mean, Infor is they have their CPQ tool, which is integrated. It's fully integrated with the ERP. So it is feeding in those make-to-order type of configurations into the system. But it's more vertical, so it's different than SAP, right? S/4HANA is a kind of all-in-one, one-size-fits-all kind of a deal there, right? So Infor is more vertical focused. So you have, for example, you can configure automotive. You mentioned parts. Automotive aftermarket parts, for example, is a perfect scenario for a CPQ tied to Cloud Suite Automotive, for example. It's just to name a brand, just because I know it, we do it. That's why I'm bringing it up. But yeah, that is different than a one size fits all, and it's different from one that's completely decoupled. And there's yet another scenario that I've seen when you're talking about. I was working with back when I was with a previous company. I was working with a company that does custom eyeglasses, custom eyewear, right?
Yeah.
So they have potentially thousands and thousands of combinations of these eyeglasses. When you get into the custom world, they have standard ones that they can ship right out. But they had Magento. So I mentioned Shopify and WooCommerce are more, kind of WooCommerce sort of in the middle between Shopify and Magento, but they had Magento and very complicated logic that was already built, and then it would just issue the parts into the ERP. So the ERP can be kind of dumb. It didn't need the configuration logic in this case, but that's a B2C scenario, B2C.
Yeah, so very interesting. And Magento obviously is going to have slightly deeper capabilities, I would say, when you compare all of these e-commerce platforms, to be completely honest, because, Magento is designed for that. But obviously a lot of e-commerce buddies are going to feel that Magento is very thick in general. It is thick for a reason. So overall, from the capabilities perspective, they are very mature, but obviously you have a lot more platforms in the market that can do similar things as well. So I don't know, Dan, if you want to move to the next story, we have some more acquisitions that we want to talk about. So you want to pick the Virtusa one, I guess?
Let's go with that. You go ahead and do your thing, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, so in this particular case, I guess you have the acquisition. This is very similar to last week's acquisition, I believe, or that was partnership or acquisition, something like that. I don't know whether you remember this or not. We covered the ServiceNow, alignment. Which company was that?
It was with Cognizant.
Right?
Yeah, they were building that Work Now or Work something like that. That was a hybrid with ServiceNow.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this show, right? Because things build up, right? So whatever we covered in last week, so now we have a little relevance, because if you compare last week's story, most likely we are going to have, when we are going to do these follow-on shows, we are going to have a lot more stories. So for example, if you compare Cognizant, Virtusa is a very similar system integrator. They are equally large, I would say, very large, obviously may not be as large as Cognizant, but they are very, very, very large. So their business model is very similar to Cognizant, the way they work. So obviously the way the system integrators work is they are trying to create the hottest practices. That's their core business model, right? So in this particular case, they are building, everybody is focusing on ServiceNow at this point of time, because obviously ServiceNow is very hot in the market. So we have seen Cognizant. My understanding is that Genpact did that. I don't know if we have captured that story or not, but I've read somewhere that they are building that practice as well. And now Virtusa is doing that too. Now, in this particular case, I don't think they are focusing on the generative AI capabilities. Last week, what we had discussed with Cognizant, they were focusing more on the technical aspect of generative AI. But Virtusa is simply building the practice. That's my understanding. I don't know if you have different understanding. And they are also building the practice for Splunk. And I don't know whether you are familiar with Splunk or not. So Splunk is a very technical platform, technical analytics platform. For the most part, that the relevance of a Splunk is going to be when you are going to have these massive IT workloads, and what you are trying to do is you are trying to draw intel from your defects or bugs that you are going to get, and you are really trying to identify patterns. You are building, analytics there. That's where Splunk is going to be really handy. So for the most part, the businesses that are going to have massive IT workloads, that is going to be your, bank, financials, insurance companies, media companies. That is going to be your technology companies. So for those, Splunk is going to be far more relevant. And that's why the system integrators generally focus on those verticals, because you have a lot more scope for custom development. In general, the system integrators focus a lot more on custom development. So that's the reason why they are building this practice. So obviously, super exciting times for ServiceNow, as well as for Splunk, as well as Virtusa. So then over to you.
Yeah, so ServiceNow is growing all over the place. I have a friend who works for Deloitte, for instance. They have a massive ServiceNow practice, and it's expanding. I mean, they were using it in government mostly, government and government contractors, but I see it expanding into other areas, like the parts. You mentioned parts. It's big in that area. Any kind of IT service desk kind of, but it's focused on services. I think it's not really. I don't see it really being much of a factor in more of your heavy distribution, supply chain, manufacturing industries. Would you say that?
So they are implementer. The way their business models, work, they are going to be in SAP space, Oracle space, a little bit of Infor maybe, in the large space. So for the most part, their business model is they have the practices for SAP, Infor, Oracle, and they are going to have partnership in the background, even though the way they are going to position themselves in the market is, hey, I am digital transformation company, but for the most part, they have partnership underneath, and they are trying to sell those products for sure.
So you see ServiceNow as a separate play. It's not on top of an ERP.
So ServiceNow, in my mind, is going to be on top of ERP. I think that's, yeah. And that's what I guess. I mean, we had agreed last time, I believe that was my understanding then.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I brought our guest on this week, because we got a little bit into the whole issue of composable and them making a sort of a move into application development with a separate layer. So that will be section 2. But I just wanted to see if you thought that these guys like the Cognizants and the Virtusa, they are having a separate ServiceNow practice that's completely, that has nothing to do with ERPs, or having ServiceNow as a development platform in a way above ERPs.
So generally, I mean, the way business model of any of the system integrators work, they are going to have individual practices for each of these technologies. Even though a project may require, let's say, SAP plus ServiceNow and many other technologies, but the way their business models work is you are going to have a ServiceNow practice, you are going to have a SAP practice, you are going to have so many different practices. And typically they are competing with each other, they are participating with each other in a deal, and that's why you have so much friction overall, with system integrators. So even though they are going to have a lot of capabilities, but it's almost like running several small companies in a very large company. That's how their business model works. So yes, you are right that overall from the technical capabilities perspective, ServiceNow is going to sit on top of ERP, but overall from the organizational alignment perspective inside these companies, they are going to have separate individual practices. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, I got it. Very interesting. All right.
So 19-minute point. I don't know if you want to cover one more story before we wrap, for the next segment. I know that we had one more.
Let's see if we can get one more in.
Yeah, so we have Acumatica. Acumatica did the summit, and there were, a couple of stories there, and that is going to be, I don't know if you had a chance to review that, but I'm looking at some of the things which are, so they are doing some of the capabilities are really, really basic, to be completely honest. Okay, especially if you look at some of the mature manufacturing ERP systems, Infor, Epicor, they always had these capabilities, right? For Acumatica, they have a lot of manufacturing capabilities, but those capabilities are very lean right now. They are not as mature. So one of the capabilities that I'm noting here in the summit that they have developed is just reporting multiple operations simultaneously. Now, that's a big deal for Acumatica right now, because in the cloud, the capabilities don't exist, right? So they are trying to release all of these capabilities. But, mature platforms already had that. So it's very exciting for, manufacturers in Acumatica ecosystem, because without that, obviously, they were struggling a lot. So it's very exciting. But then, if you look at some of the other ecosystems, they already had that. So that is one. I don't know, Dan, if you want to pick on something else from that story.
Yeah, I mean, reporting multiple operations in a manufacturing company has been in ERP since the 90s, in bigger ERP systems, even dating back to Bond. We had that. But I think it is exciting for them. They're adding functionality that maybe would enable them to go a little bit up market, because they're focused on construction and a couple other industries. I think manufacturing is also a focus, but they're SMB from the way I understand it, pretty much, right? It
very small businesses right now.
It looks good, but it's not terribly powerful, I think, versus other systems like an S/4HANA or something. But it's exciting for them, right, to add that kind of functionality that will allow them to kind of move a little bit up market. When I see the ratings, like your ratings, for example, when you do SMBs, they're high. When you do overall, they might be lower or even not even in the top 10. And I think it's the same way with Eric. He does the same sort of, the types of ratings of Acumatica. So exciting for them. And could allow them to move a little bit up market, but I don't see them like challenging the big players in the enterprise space.
Yeah, I don't think that's their target market, to be completely honest. Okay, that's not what they are targeting. Their target market is probably below $100 million. That's their sweet spot. Obviously, once they develop these capabilities, they might be able to compete in larger opportunities. But right now, as of today, they don't need those capabilities. If they develop all of those capabilities, then the product model is going to be slightly mature. And once you have that, then your implementation cost is going to increase as well. So obviously, you have to keep everything in mind when you are looking at, a specific set of customers. In that segment, you have a very specific need. You require leaner, data model, leaner product model, so that companies can implement this, in a much lower budget. So again, different priorities, different needs, I guess, in different market segments.
It certainly looks good. It's very nice looking system, very nice UI. People like it a lot.
Yeah. So then, I don't know, let me see, 23 minutes point. I don't know if you want to wrap and then move on to the next segment.
Yeah, let's go to break.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today. Now back to the show.
Hi, everybody. We're back from break. And the second section in our show every week is going to be an interview. And my guest today is Ronald Haantjes from Vanenburg.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me here on your second show. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. My name is Ronald Haantjes. I'm with Vanenburg. I'm a commercial director for North America. And looking forward to this conversation today.
Excellent. So I've got a big slate of questions for you, my friend.
Okay.
So last week I had a conversation with you after the first show, and you pointed out a little correction, I would say, in what I was saying. I was explaining about Vanenburg, about the Rapid tool, and I brought up the term composable ERP, which I have been corrected that is not the correct term, and I should be using a different term. Can you explain?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I understand that you use a composable ERP because we keep on talking about ERP all the time, right? But, the difference is really, for us at least, is composable apps, composable microservices, not we're not in the business of ERP. We have a long history in ERP with the Baan company, with Cordis, the company founded by Jan Baan 40 years ago, or a little bit longer. We could easily have bought and built another ERP system, but we let other people do that. We looked at beyond ERP, that was a big thing, and how can we make the processes easier? Sam already referred a little bit to it earlier in this conversation today, how ServiceNow is doing that. So we see a similar approach. So we look at the processes that are really important for the knowledge workers, the people at the front end. So what we want to do is these intelligent workflows, combine that with information and intelligence that they can make informed decisions really at the moment that they need to make these decisions in the supply chain, in other areas. So instead of calling it it's not a full-blown ERP. ERP can stay the core ERP, and let's be honest, it has not changed since the Y2K. Since Y2K, ERP is still the same. And the GL is a GL, and many of the processes are not changed. So we're looking at making life easier on the existing systems, not customizing, but just building apps that can become agnostic. So even if you are on an on-prem now, or you're already on a cloud version, you could migrate to any other version because the apps are agnostic and they can be put there again. So it's a slight difference. So cloud composable ERP, we're not that. We're composable apps on ERP.
Okay, but I got a little excited though on the topic of ERPs because we were talking about on-premise systems and modernizing on-premise systems. And I think that your system has a rapid development tool, the way I understand it, as a great prospect for helping companies that have big on-premise ERP systems to modernize now while they're in the process of upgrading to the cloud.
That's true. So, everybody has heard about the low-code, no-code, phenomena. Everything is going on low-code, no-code. So the low-code platforms, we looked at the different low-code platforms, and we felt that the low-code platforms created a vendor lock-in, created a very costly, expensive model for a lot of customers to modernize their systems. Also, when you create a low-code, it is really, that's it. There's your app. And it's not easy to adjust that app anymore. We looked at it differently. We wanted to create an app that was no vendor lock-in. The app could be running anywhere. Our software runs on Google, and I will explain it a little bit later. But the tool itself runs on Google, but all the apps can run on any cloud or on-prem. It gives you also the possibility then to modify and adjust the code. Just as a Java developer, you can just change the code. So the reason that we built Rapid was actually twofold. We all deal with resource shortage, and but we still needed to deliver on time. So a customer of ours needed more product delivered faster, and our own team came up with a rapid application development tool, and that became Rapid. So the Rapid application development tool is now available for customers that they can use it themselves to improve their development speed and the quality of development and all that kind of stuff. And we use it to build solutions for our customers. We can see a factor of 1 to 5, like one license is the speed of 5 consultants. Just this week, we worked with a customer, as an example. We worked with a customer that had a great idea for modernizing the supply chain. To bring more intelligence in it, to have better decisions, faster decisions. Don't run into supply chain issues that easily anymore. So he documented it, sent us a 9-page document or something in that manner. We had 1 or 2 phone calls with him. We ran it into our system. Our consultant basically defined it in less than 3 or 4 days, and presented the prototype back to the customer that got approved, and the customer is ready for a proof of concept with us, and now the prototype will go to a developer. But 60% of the work is already done. So the developer only needs to do the fun thing that the developer likes to do, and do the cool things that they can show their skills, and that's it. And also then we deploy that solution into any cloud. It can be in the Google Cloud, can be in AWS, it doesn't matter. And the customer has now full control over that app with no runtime license.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was thinking about that in the context of going into a big ERP migration, let's say from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. Let's say they got to do a ton in the next 3 years, right? Because there's a deadline on 2027, so they're all probably understandably freaking out, and they're wondering what they're going to do with all those years of customizations of the system. Bond 4, same thing, right? You and I know because we come from Bond, before it was in 4. So,
that's a very good point. It's a very good point. You need to see it as a bridge, right? So, if you have your existing system, it's a bloody open heart surgery, right? When you do an ERP implementation, you disrupt the whole organization for a year or how long your implementation is going to take. In this case, we can bring modern solutions really quick to the customer. Well, they still run the original system and the implementation can start on something new. Or maybe never at all. Maybe that old system, you can bring the system of record, create a system of record with the core ERP systems, wherever it is, the Gartner approach, the PACE layered model, and you can just build layers on top of that. You layer of differentiation, a system of differentiation, a system of innovation. That is really the strategy then, to help customers to get access to that new technology, the faster. It is not just technology. It is about improving the processes and to fix those gaps that were in standard ERP and that were all overly customized. So that gives you the ability to reduce that customization, build that layer on top, and then you can make a decision to which ERP system you want to go. Is it with the same vendor or with maybe a different vendor? Because remember, the applications are agnostic.
Yeah, well, I mean, the prospect of this is, if I'm a CIO, right? So I'm sitting here, let's say I'm at Caterpillar, for instance, right? Massive company, SAP at corporate, some cloud suite Infor, this and that at different divisions like Progress Rail, like, Solar Turbines or whatever. At any rate, I have various versions. I have various customizations of those versions. I have many, many different ERP systems in various stages of disrepair, if you will, that need to be integrated. So what you're proposing, if I understand it correctly, make sure I'm saying the right thing this time. I'm not saying composable ERP anymore. I'm striking that from my vocabulary, by the way. But I could go in and say, take Rapid, go engage with you guys, also with an ERP partner of ERP of choice we're going for, right? And say, okay, we're going to build these applications now in Google Cloud to take the place of, let's say, customizations that are in the SAP ECC system. And, because it's a difficult process to go from ECC to S/4HANA for many, many reasons, as we all know. But one of the big reasons is you lose functionality when you go to that system. And you've got to redo, if you want to take a BTP or something like that, you need to redo those customizations in the new system in S/4HANA. That's a very painful, long, drawn out, expensive process, right? What you're proposing is don't do that.
No.
Put these applications up there, take the core, and then strip that, in essence, strip off the customization. Don't worry about versions or anything like that, right? Because they're all where they need to be. Maybe you have a long-term plan to build up to the cloud or to upload to the cloud for your ERP systems. But in the interim, just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and build the applications, right? Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, no,
that would make me relax. I would relax. I would sleep better as a CIO if I had that problem.
You're talking about something really big, right? So that needs a complete strategy but is exactly what we're talking about, right? So it's a little bit different than just building a small app in this case. This is much bigger. So now you're looking at sunsetting a bunch of different systems and spooling up another system, and in the meantime keep the lights on and don't disrupt the company too much. Right. So, we are building that. We can also take a look at, okay, maybe this functionality is not that great in any of these other ERPs or of any future ERP. Like Sam was just referring to Yonder. We have built TMS and warehouse management systems for customers who couldn't get that from their vendor. Okay, so then they decided to upgrade to another ERP system, but they took a TMS, they took a WMS that needed their specifications, their needs. Like it was in retail, it was in TMS and transportation. So we can definitely do that kind of projects and make CIOs sleep much better.
I think that's a very exciting prospect in and of itself. And I know that you have done up to date, you have done work on SAP workflows, because I see it on your website, but I saw an example of SAP up there. And I think you built that probably on top of ECC, maybe, right? The on-prem version of SAP, or it could have been S4HANA. Either way is fine with you, right? You don't care.
No, we don't. So we have a customer, a very large automotive customer in France. It is that customer. Let me just give a little bit of background. That's a customer since mid 2000s, like in 2008. They came to us. They had like a lot of Lotus Notes still, and we had built a product. It's called the Cordis Process Factory, and they were very interested in using the Cordis Process Factory because the Process Factory was the killer app for Lotus Notes. So we were able to replace Lotus Notes with that app on the Google platform. Well, we were not on Google yet, but they asked us to go on Google because they were on Google. So we built it on the Google platform, Google Enterprise, Google Apps. So we went in there, take a look at our Lotus Notes, had I think 2,000 Lotus Notes or something, and we reduced it to a few hundred Lotus Notes to Google Apps. So that was a massive reduction in cost because it was all just in their own Google Cloud that they self-hosted, I believe. And then they looked at other issues in their system. There was like all kinds of other processes that they wanted to improve. And we worked in that environment with, I think, 200, if I'm not mistaken, 200 different SAP entities around the world. And we built and integrated into those systems, warranty management, claim management, all kinds of interactions that they had for their customers. I don't know all the versions that we worked with, but ECC 6 was definitely involved in that. It even got to a point that this customer was coming to us with a question about they were using Microsoft Project for 20 or 40,000 users, a lot of users, and they got a deal, of course, on that kind of volume. So they paid about 400,000 euro dollars per year on this on the Microsoft Project. It was not scaling. Collaboration didn't work. There were a lot of other issues that the team was not very happy with it. So they asked us to take a look at it and use Rapid to build another solution for them. So we took about 6 weeks, and $250,000 later, now they're running Microsoft, no longer Microsoft Project. They're using a Google version of Microsoft Project that we built for them. And I'm not sure about the integration into SAP, but there's a possibility there too.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you used to work with Microsoft as well too. So
yep.
I imagine this would work like Dynamics AX that's heavily customized that needs to go to a Business Central or a Dynamics 365 finance and supply chain or whatever they're calling it right now.
Whatever the name is today, right? Yeah.
Whatever the name is today. But it works equally well. I like the fact that, correcting me from composable ERP to composable applications, which is exactly right? Because theoretically, I mean, if you replace Microsoft projects, tons of licenses, and saved them a lot of money and gave them a better application online, that's amazing. That's an application. That's a general application that anybody could build for any business in any industry, right? Yeah. It's very exciting to me. I the more I hear about it, the more I like it. And I'll tell you another thing that I like, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong here, but the way I see it from an implementation. So I'm always thinking ERP implementations, right? Because that's what I do. That's what we sell, cloud ERP. So we're not trying to replace cloud ERP, and you're saying that you don't want to replace cloud ERP. You want to play nice with it, right? You want to build on top of it, which is fantastic. But the prospect that I see, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to improve the speed, the quality, and the efficacy of ERP implementations. I see this as a way to basically take all the customizations, all the things that cause problems when you're upgrading, take it away, strip it away, take this clean core of the ERP, re-implement it, because you don't want to implement the crap that you brought in, 20 years ago, right? You don't want to redo that. And we talked about this a lot last week, using composable as a possibility for replacing customizations, rationalizing customizations. And I think it has a great possibility for that. But in terms of an implementation specifically, an ERP implementation or a company like ours, a consulting company, could take any ERP and work with Vanenburg to strip the customizations off, build the composable applications, not ERP, build the composable applications in Google Cloud, work with any cloud, any combination of cloud, ERP, or on-premise, and build a system fast, right? Because then your strategy is, I don't have to start upgrading my cloud ERP until a year from now. But I still have a strategy for it, right? And I still have a choice of a cloud ERP system because you need it. You need it, right? And in fact, everybody's pushing, like SAP says, you got to be off S4 onto S4HANA, right? You can't be on ECC forever, right? They can't support it. They want everybody to go to HANA in the cloud. So you say, that's fine, but I won't do it for a year. I can relax. I can build these applications, strip everything off, clean up the core, and upgrade when time is ready.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good strategy, and we fully support that. Now that it opens so many opportunities, right? And it is not just the. I think it gives a lot of customers who have been stuck on a system and they get a kind of a gun against their head. They have to go to another system. That they get a little bit of air, right? But this is not only that. It is, even if you have a modern system, there still will be issues, right? So it's not for nothing that everybody buys everything. This whole story around ServiceNow, I think it's really important for us to take note of that. Bill McDermott is having a killer quarter because he's doing this, right? All his customers are paying for them, by the way.
Of course.
Right? But it is only small stuff. I mean, you were talking about it earlier that it is on top of ERP. I agree. But ServiceNow will be on top of ERP for sure. But right now it is other stuff that they are doing, that they are modernizing and that they are creating little apps for. And that is fantastic and exciting. We are already further than that. And you will hear more about that next week in your other interview.
Yes.
You'll get a lot more of that. So anyway, I think I should leave it there because that is really good opening for the next week. But I appreciate that you had us on for this opportunity to talk about it.
This is fantastic, Ronald. And I think, like Sam said, everything we're doing here, or the intent here, is to shine a light on a lot of new things that maybe people haven't seen before. ERP is a kind of dull topic. It's sleepy. We want to kind of wake it up in a way, right? And we want to build also. I think it's exciting, but I'm an ERP guy, right? I think it's exciting, but I want to say what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, I just want to say, being in ERP for so long, and then, you and I, when we were in the band days, you talked to us about zero programming, and that's where we look at low code, no code now. And we looked at DEN. Remember the Dynamic Enterprise Modeler? and other functionality that we had back then, that the tool couldn't stop. The tools that we had couldn't make it. But if you really look in your Infor system and what they're using to build Infor, it could be bad tools. And that is why we have continued to use, and we are way further than that. And we have a good solution that is very attractive for people. No vendor lock-in, no runtime licenses, easy to use. So, and
that's
exciting.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to Jan Van next week. As you know, I'm a big fan. So thank you for helping with that organizing and everything too. So I think we'll go to a break and then we'll come back with Q&A.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. And if you prefer to listen, please rate and review the Insight Jam podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is section 3. This is our opportunity to do Q&A for the previous sections. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sam. I'm sure he has some questions for our guest, Ronald Haantjes. And then we'll work through that back and forth. And then we have some questions to ask at the end.
Yeah. So first of all, great interview, Jen. Love the conversation. So I'm going to talk about some of the points that you have discussed in the interview. Obviously, I want to hear your perspective as well in terms of what you felt from the interview. Okay. So number one, the way the interview went, great conversation, but that was slightly more technology focused. So we are going to also add business layers to the conversation in terms of, how businesses approach this, which are going to be the use cases that are going to be right fit for something like what you guys were discussing. By the way, kudos to you that you guys were discussing composable ERP. You wanted to take that out and not use that term, which is amazing. Wonderful. I like it. Because there has to be a boundary between these two. Composable has a place, ERP has a place. Okay, so we'll discuss that too in terms of where it makes sense to have ERP versus not ERP. Okay. Other things that you had discussed that, when companies are migrating from these legacy workloads to, let's say, they are not in a position to migrate their ERP, what are going to be their options? So we can talk about that journey as well, where this approach is going to make sense and where that might not make sense as much. And then some of the other things from the interview, for example, let's say, if you look at the Lotus Note 5 migration, that's a great use case for what they had done. And the reason for that is because that process does not belong to ERP to begin with. So for the most part, if you look at the enterprise-wide processes, if you look at the whole enterprise architecture, and in most cases, when you look at the ERP community, they don't necessarily use the term enterprise architecture. When you look at from that lenses, ERP's scope was always maybe 40%, 50%, even though somebody threw this term that, ERP is everything, but that's not how ERP was supposed to work to begin with. So you still have those 40 and 50% processes that needed to be handled in the traditional days, I guess, companies were handling those in the spreadsheets or some sort of custom app, or, they were always siloed. So this is a great use case for what they are doing. Now, is this going to have a place, let's say, in the SMB space? It's hard to debate that. And the reason for that is because they are not going to have as large budgets. Okay, so let's go back to the fundamentals of ERP, why ERP exists to begin with. Okay, for the most part, the ERP approach makes sense when you are discussing this scenario more from the buy and build perspective. Okay, when you are buying a product, you are buying for a reason so that you don't have to invest as much in developing that product. That's why you buy a product. So it doesn't matter whether you are buying ERP or you are buying something else. You are buying something. And now if you are going to customize that, then obviously you are investing a lot. So you have to look from that lenses. And if you start looking from that lenses, then it's going to be much easier to be able to decide, okay, which candidates are going to be right fit for the ERP or enterprise software, and where the custom development or custom processes are going to make sense. So I offered a lot there. I don't know, Dan, what you picked up from the interview as well as from my analysis.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously customization is a big expense when you're dealing with an ERP, right? And when you go into an implementation, considering whether you want to have custom applications and how you do them is an issue for SMBs in particular, like you said, because it can be expensive. But I think it's more expensive and more restrictive when you're using low code, no code tools within an ERP system. What I'm talking about here is that if you want to redo those customizations using the SAP ECC tools or whatever it's or
it's a difficult word.
BTP or whatever it's called, right? Depending on which version you have. That's a very expensive thing because you got to get consultants in, you got to do specs, you got to test, you got to have developers do all of those sorts of things. I think the composable application route is much simpler and cheaper, and I'll tell you why. You don't have to use all the individual low code, no code, or bond tools, or SAP, AP. You don't have to use those things to build them. You can come up here and build them here without using all those proprietary tools, so to speak, right? And you don't need all these different developers, all these different SIs or whatever that do that kind of work. That's expensive work. This is one tool, a very fast implementation cycle. They built these tools like for the Lotus Notes application very quickly. They're kind of drag and drop workflow kind of tools. And I'll have Ronald share the website and everything like that. But it's one place to build all the tools for all the underlying ERP systems. That's the way I understand it. So
very interesting perspective. So obviously, I think the fundamental assumption there is going to be that if businesses knew how to model these processes, if they had the subject matter expertise in modeling the processes from the business perspective as well as from data perspective, then it would be easier. Okay. But generally, they don't have that. So what they are trying to do is, I completely understand your position that if you are going to have just one tool, and if you had this consulting expertise, inside the organization, then you would not have this problem. For example, let's say if you look at Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 1000 companies, generally they are going to have far mature IT organization. They understand why IT require 20 or 100 different roles. The way manufacturing works, okay? IT is the same. There you are going to have a role for business analyst, product owner. You are going to have quality analyst. And, you can talk to Ron or Jan Van as well. I mean, they are going to say, hey, in my organization, I have 50 different roles. Now, why do you need all of these 50 roles? You need these 50 roles because they are going to have very specific expertise that they bring to the table. Now, when you look at the SMB companies, they generally don't have as much money to hire these 100 skills. And that's why you have something that is going to be built. And that's why they are buying, so that they don't have to hire all of this. So again, I think I'm going to go back to my point that, okay, when you are looking at the enterprise scale that are going to have very mature IT organization, they are really deep into those custom development processes. For those, something like this is going to make sense. Okay, when you look at, SMB companies, they just don't have enough funds to be able to support these processes, and that's why the ERP centric processes are going to make sense again. But it might depend upon the use case. In some cases, there is going to be a place for these custom processes because ERP can never support those. ERP was never designed for those. For example, let's say if you look at workflow automation, you look at CRM centric processes, you look at recruitment centric processes. They were never sort of standardized, to be completely honest. Okay, so when you go from company to company, even in the same industry, they are going to have very different processes. So again, it depends upon the use case. Use case matters a lot. It's not, ERP versus no ERP. It doesn't work that way. It has to be use case specific for certain use cases. This is going to make sense for certain use cases. ERP is going to make sense. I'm going to go back to my other point where, let's say if you are talking about the stopgap analysis, right? So for example, let's say if you have a company and some of these companies are going through many different cycles for upgrade. So, and a lot of these enterprise companies, they acquire, let's say, 50 to 100 companies in a given year. And when they are going to do that, then they cannot really identify their to-be state. So they need something that is going to be a stopgap solution. So I think that's what Ronald was referring to when he was talking about, hey, can we have something in the interim before we completely migrate this workload to a new ERP? Now, in that use case, this particular process makes perfect sense because not in every case you can replace those legacy systems. In some cases, you are just not able to do that. So Dan, I know I spoke a lot. Now, more to you, I guess.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. It's more enterprise, makes more sense in enterprise, one. And two, I think in this scenario you said coming in with like a smaller system or, workflows where they had analysts and developers in their IT group that were, ready to do or could do the other developments, then that's fine. But I think I love it in the stopgap scenario, and I love it in the, and I think it can go pretty low in terms of the size of company, and I'll tell you why. I think it is relatively low cost in terms of the development that they charge. It enables you to get away from runtime licenses on things like AWS, the way I understand it. Ronald will hammer me on this one, I think. But there's runtime licenses that it substitutes for, so that saves costs there, right? And the development time and expense for the developers is relatively low. So there may be some sort of, certainly there's a floor below which it doesn't go for an SMB. I don't think it was meant to be a very small family-owned business, mom and pop SMB solution. I don't think it was meant to be that. I think it's an enterprise solution. And I think that it very well covers, and that's the most exciting part of it, like the Lotus Notes use case and the SAP combined solution. And another thing that I've been talking to Ronald about, which to me is very exciting, is that they are working on, and he mentioned it a little bit, they're working on a use case of a kind of a order to cash kind of flow that dips into the supply chain as well. So a pre-built application that can work on any ERP, on top of any ERP, that would be something like an ordering application that goes all the way through and goes into the supply chain. So you know how in an MRP system or a ERP system, in the planning engine, there's available to promise, right? That works within the system, that works within ERP, what it knows, right? In terms of lead times and on-hand inventory and so on, and preferred suppliers maybe. But it doesn't go into the supply chain. Right? So you don't know, like if it's a particular part that you're going to make and the salesperson is ordering it, you don't really know the correct available to promise until you have information about your suppliers. When is that supplier going to get it to you, and when, and how many, right? What he's been working on, I think what he was alluding to was a preset application that would actually do that would actually go into the supply chain and to find out things like, I could promise 30 on this date, but I could promise 50 on this date if I throw it out here, because it's the vendor is going to come in and say, I can deliver it by that time.
Yeah.
Does that
so,
sound
I mean,
interesting?
Yeah, no, it does. And in supply chain as well, I mean, there are use cases. So for example, let's say you talk about internal versus external supply chain, and the way, and I don't know, we have done 40 episodes, I guess, around this topic, okay, on WBS Talks, to be completely honest, okay? So the way we define this is, you have the four walls of your facility. So that is your internal supply chain versus external, when you have to collaborate with others, when you have to do your joint forecasting planning, where you are dependent upon vendors. So that is what I call is the process that traditionally always resided inside these supply chain suites. That's where the supply chain suite makes sense. So in that, you have a lot more workflows for your workflow automation. And that's where even ServiceNow is actually playing, to be completely honest, okay? So there also you have to make a choice. Do you want to develop all of this from scratch, or do you want to buy a product that is going to do this for you? Again, everything is going to have a pros and cons, either approach, whatever approach that you are going to take. So I don't know, Dan, so we are at 1 hour point. I don't know if you want to hit on some more points, or do you want to wrap?
So we're the ERP doctors. We're going to be doing this every week. And next week we have a real treat. My former boss, Jan Baan, the founder of the Baan Company in the 90s, and two other companies, including Vanenburg, where Ronald works, since then, is going to be my guest in segment number 2. So can't wait for you guys to join it. Really enjoying this. Thank you very much, Sam, for your perspectives, and have a good week.